They made him sit next to the trash at a family wedding. They wanted to remind him where he stood in their story: unimportant, forgotten, disposable. But what they didn't know, the man they tried to humiliate was the one who controlled the entire venue. What followed wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It was elegant, calculated, and unforgettable. Stay with us until the end, because this isn't just a story about quiet revenge. It's about what happens when someone finally realizes their own worth and refuses to be treated like less ever again. Like the video, subscribe, and let's begin. I got the wedding invitation exactly 11 days before the ceremony. No save the date, no warm phone call, just a plain white envelope in the mailbox with my name misspelled on the front. My cousin Jeremy was getting married. The same cousin I used to lend money to when he couldn't afford his books in college. The same one who cried on my shoulder after his dad passed. And now, I was just an afterthought. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe it got delayed in the mail. But after texting my aunt to thank her for the invite, she casually mentioned that everyone else had gotten theirs months ago. That stung more than I expected. I sat in silence, staring at the simple card with their names in embossed gold, and I debated whether I should even go. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Why go where you're clearly not wanted? But then I thought about Grandma June. She always told me, family shows up, even when it hurts. She was turning 82 soon, and I knew this might be the last big event she'd be able to attend. She loved Jeremy. And she loved me. I didn't want her to sit there wondering why I wasn't present. So I made up my mind. I'd go. I'd wear the navy suit she liked. I'd bring a small gift, smile, and keep my distance. No drama. No confrontation. Just presence. The week leading up to the wedding, I didn't hear a word from anyone. No follow-up. No seating arrangements. No updates. I checked the wedding website out of curiosity and saw dozens of engagement photos with laughing family members, my uncles, my other cousins. I wasn't in a single one. It was like I didn't exist in their story. Still, I booked my flight, got a rental car, and flew to Oregon the night before the wedding. I stayed at a modest hotel 15 minutes from the venue. The morning of the event, I ironed my shirt slowly, trying to shake the feeling in my chest that I was walking into something that wasn't for me. But I kept hearing Grandma's voice, "Be the better person." I arrived at the venue 5 minutes before the ceremony. The valet barely looked at me when I handed him my keys. No one from the family came to greet me. As guests took their seats in the outdoor courtyard, I quietly found a spot in the very back row. It was drizzling slightly, and someone had taken the umbrella from my assigned seat. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, letting the drops fall on my shoulders, watching Jeremy smile at everyone else like they were his whole world. But I stayed. For Grandma. The ceremony was short. Beautiful, yes, but distant. I clapped when everyone else clapped, I smiled when appropriate, but no one looked my way. I didn't expect red carpets or hugs, but even a nod from Jeremy would have meant something. Instead, he looked past me like I was another guest's plus one. I saw him greet people in the front rows, old friends, cousins I hadn't seen since high school, and even the florist. But not me. After the ceremony, the guests were ushered toward the indoor reception area. The venue was gorgeous, high ceilings with vintage chandeliers, white roses everywhere, and long tables arranged elegantly across the room. A string quartet played something soft and classical. As everyone started finding their names on the seating chart, I hesitated. My name wasn't listed among the family tables. Eventually, I spotted it, way at the bottom of the chart, next to a name I didn't recognize. Nathan, table 14. I walked through the maze of candles and laughing relatives until I found table 14. It wasn't really a table, it was a small, round bistro-style setup near the swinging doors to the kitchen. And right next to it were 2 tall garbage bins. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the staff had placed them there temporarily. But no. Throughout the next 20 minutes, Waiters kept pushing by me with trays, loudly opening the trash lids and dropping food scraps right beside me. One even apologized, whispering, "Sorry, man. They told us not to move those." The stench was subtle but humiliating. I tried to sit straight, tried not to look bothered. I even made polite conversation with Nathan, a quiet, balding man who apparently worked with the groom at some point. He seemed embarrassed for me. I caught the glance of my aunt, Jeremy's mom, looking at my table with the faintest smirk before returning to her wine glass. People were starting to notice. One waiter looked genuinely uncomfortable. Another guest passed by and muttered, "Who puts a table there?" before walking off. Still, no one from my family approached me. Not even Grandma. She had been seated near the front, surrounded by cousins and laughing grandkids. She hadn't seen where I was placed. I kept looking down at my plate, the food untouched. My appetite had vanished. My heart was pounding, not from anger, but from a cold kind of sadness. A realization. They didn't forget me. They chose this. They wanted to make a statement. And I had received it, loud and clear. I stayed seated by the trash longer than I should have. Maybe part of me hoped someone would notice, walk over, laugh awkwardly and say, "This wasn't supposed to happen," then move me to a better table. But that never came. The servers kept working, the guests kept clinking glasses, and my name remained next to the garbage bins like it belonged there. Halfway through the reception, I got up to use the restroom. I passed tables filled with people I grew up with, cousins I used to play soccer with during summers, aunts who used to kiss my forehead at Christmas. None of them looked at me. A few even paused their conversations when I walked by, as if my presence was something to avoid. I felt like an outsider in my own family. When I returned, someone had cleared my plate even though I hadn't touched it. My seat was slightly moved, like I had been in the way. That was when it hit me, they didn't just seat me by the trash. They were making sure I felt disposable. I looked across the room and spotted Jeremy laughing with his groomsmen. He was beaming, relaxed, glowing in that way grooms often are. I remembered when he called me 3 years ago, panicked about losing his job. I was the one who gave him a freelance gig at my events company. That project paid his rent for 2 months. And now? He wouldn't even look me in the eye. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar. The name of the venue caught my attention, Belgrove Estate. I knew it well. My company had exclusive contracts with several vendors that operated in that estate, tables, lighting, staff rotation schedules. In fact, we'd helped renovate part of the main hall 2 years earlier. My company was still contracted for the brunch event happening there the next morning, one Jeremy's bride had proudly talked about online, calling it her farewell fairy tale brunch. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I tapped to call Ethan, my operations manager. "Hey," he answered quickly. "You at the wedding?" "Yes." "I need you to do something for me," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Just make a note, cancel all services scheduled for Belgrove Estate tomorrow morning. Send the official notice tonight. Contract breach. Use Clause 7B, inappropriate treatment of staff or affiliates." I paused. "Don't explain further unless they ask." There was a silence. Then he said, "Copy that. Consider it done." I hung up and placed the phone face down. My pulse wasn't racing. I wasn't angry. I felt aligned. Like something in me had snapped into place. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to make a scene. But I wasn't going to let them treat me like trash and walk away with a smile either. I left the wedding quietly. No goodbyes, no scene. Just a calm walk out through the back entrance, away from the music, the speeches, and the smell of discarded food. The night air was cool and still, wrapping around me like a quiet reminder that peace doesn't always come wrapped in kindness, it sometimes comes after you finally draw the line. Driving back to the hotel, I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence. I kept replaying the day in my head, the invitation that came late, the seating by the trash, the looks that were more like warnings than greetings. But more than that, I kept thinking about all the moments over the years when I gave this family my time, my energy, my generosity, and how invisible that had become to them. At the hotel, I changed out of my suit, sat at the edge of the bed, and scrolled through photos on my phone. There were pictures from my cousin's graduation, where I stood beside him holding the camera while everyone else celebrated. There was one from the day I helped move him into his first apartment. No one else had shown up that day. Just me in a truck full of second-hand furniture. I didn't regret helping him. I regretted assuming it meant something permanent. That night, I slept better than I expected. No dreams. Just stillness. The next morning, I woke up to 10 missed calls. 4 were from unknown numbers. 1 was from Jeremy. The others were from his bride, her sister, and my aunt. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they were about. I opened my inbox and found the forwarded confirmation from Ethan. Our team had officially pulled out of the Belgrove brunch. No tables, no food, no flowers, no sound equipment. The venue had tried to contact us, but the contract clause was airtight. We had the right to protect our brand from mistreatment. And seating the company's founder by the trash counted. By noon, texts started pouring in. What did you do? How could you ruin her big day like this? You're bitter and cruel. She's devastated. Grandma's crying. Are you proud? I read each message slowly. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't ask how I felt. Just blame. Just outrage. Just noise. But one message stopped me. It was from Grandma June. I just heard. I didn't know they sat you like that. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I would have said something. I love you. I stared at her words for a long time. Then I finally replied. I know you love me. That's the only reason I came. There was no vengeance in my heart. No satisfaction in their panic. What I felt was something else entirely, clarity. I had spent years investing in a family that saw me as expendable. I had allowed their approval to hold weight over my worth. That ended today. From here on, I'd only go where I was seen. Not just invited. I took a long walk that afternoon. No destination in mind, just a need to breathe outside the weight of family politics and fake smiles. The small town where the wedding had taken place was quiet on Sundays. I passed flower shops closing early, kids riding bikes, and couples sipping coffee on patios. Life moved on. So would I. At a small cafe, I sat by the window with a cup of black coffee and opened my notebook. It was something I hadn't done in months. Work had consumed so much of my energy lately that reflection had fallen to the side. But now, it felt necessary. I wrote one question at the top of the page. What do I owe people who don't respect me? The answer came fast, nothing. It felt freeing. I flipped the page and started writing down ideas, not about revenge, not about family, but about how I wanted to reshape my life and business. I had built something successful, something valuable, but I had been giving away parts of it to people who only called when they needed a favor. That would change. By the time I finished my coffee, I had a list of boundaries I planned to set, partnerships I'd end, and clients I'd stop bending over backwards for. My company would reflect who I was, not just what others expected from me. Back at the hotel, I packed my bags and checked out early. My flight wasn't until the next morning, but I wanted out of that town. I drove to a nearby coastal area 2 hours away and found a last-minute rental overlooking the ocean. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. I spent the evening watching the waves crash against the rocks, letting go of a version of myself that had spent too many years chasing approval from people who rarely looked back. That night, I texted Ethan again. Let's talk about restructuring some of our contracts next week. I want our team focused on people who see our value. He replied instantly. Absolutely. I've been waiting for you to say that. I smiled. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was deciding. This wasn't about canceling brunch or embarrassing a bride. It was about reclaiming my self-worth quietly and firmly. I turned off my phone, opened the window, and let the sea air fill the room. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. By Monday morning, the storm had reached full strength. My phone was flooded with messages from numbers I didn't recognize, people from the wedding, vendors, distant relatives who hadn't texted me in years. Screenshots of angry social media posts floated through group chats I was suddenly added to. Apparently, the bride's sister had taken to Instagram to expose the sabotage. She called me petty, insecure, a drama queen in a suit. They had no idea what actually happened. They only knew a brunch got canceled, and someone had to be blamed. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't need to. Back in the city, I returned to the office that Tuesday. The team welcomed me like they always did, kind, focused, curious about how the wedding had gone. I kept it simple. I just said, "We won't be working with the Belgrove crowd anymore," and everyone nodded without asking further. Ethan gave me a knowing glance and said, "We've already archived their account." We moved on. The week passed, and something unexpected began to happen. A few of our longtime partners, florists, caterers, musicians, reached out and thanked us. Apparently, word had spread in the industry. They'd seen how the family had treated one of their own. One caterer even said, that seating arrangement wasn't a mistake. They've done that kind of thing before. I hadn't realized how many people had quietly noticed. Later that week, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. It was from Jeremy. It started with, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to explain." He wrote that the seating chart had been his wife's idea, and that he hadn't noticed where I was put until it was too late. He admitted that he should have done something about it and that he hadn't realized how much I'd helped him over the years until people started reminding him, especially Grandma. But what stood out most wasn't his apology. It was his confusion. "I don't understand why you'd go so far as to destroy the brunch. It feels extreme." That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. To him, sitting me by the trash wasn't extreme. To him, what I did, reclaiming my dignity, was the overreaction. I didn't reply to the letter. Instead, I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. A reminder of the version of me I was leaving behind. That Friday, I stood in front of my team and made an announcement. We're changing direction. From now on, I want our brand associated with respect, not just luxury. No more chasing high-profile names that treat our people like background noise. We'll work with clients who treat everyone, from the intern to the founder, with the same level of grace. There was a quiet pause. Then applause. Something had shifted. In the fallout of humiliation, I had found my voice. And I was going to use it wisely. The following weeks brought something I hadn't expected, peace. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that settles in slowly, like the absence of background noise you didn't know was there. I stopped checking social media, stopped wondering who was still whispering about me at family gatherings. I focused on the business, and more importantly, on the people in it. I started having one-on-one conversations with everyone on the team. Not about deadlines or sales numbers, but about how they felt working with us, what they wanted more of, what they were proud of. Their responses floored me. Some admitted they never felt seen in previous jobs. Others said this was the first workplace where kindness wasn't mistaken for weakness. It made me realize something. What happened at that wedding, being sat by the trash, being dismissed, wasn't just a personal insult. It was a reflection of a culture I no longer wanted to participate in. A culture where power meant silence, where appearances mattered more than integrity, and where certain people were always seated in the shadows. I had allowed myself to be part of that for too long, thinking I had to earn my seat at the table by being agreeable. By being useful. By being the one who never complained. That version of me was gone. One afternoon, I got a call from Grandma June. Her voice was warm, but heavy. "Sweetheart," she said, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer with your whole heart. I smiled. Go ahead. Did you cancel the brunch because they hurt your feelings, or because they made you feel like you didn't matter? I paused. That question cut deeper than all the accusations I'd received. Both, I said quietly. But mostly the second one. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That's what I thought. And I'm proud of you. I raised you to be kind, but I never wanted you to let people step on your light." I felt tears form behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from the validation I didn't know I still needed. She continued, "They're angry because they've never been told no. You did what I couldn't at my age. You reminded them that no one gets to treat people like furniture. Especially not family." We talked for another hour. She told me about her own regrets, her own moments of silence when she should have spoken. And in that conversation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Whole. Complete. Seen. I hung up the phone and stepped outside. The late afternoon sun poured across the street. Everything felt a little clearer, a little lighter. Some storms don't come to destroy. They come to clear the air. A few months passed, and life moved into a different rhythm. Without even realizing it, I had stepped into a version of myself that felt truer. Lighter. I started waking up without dread in my chest. Work became more intentional. I turned down 2 major contracts because the clients carried reputations for treating staff poorly. And I didn't hesitate. I didn't apologize. I started sharing bits of my story online, not the wedding itself, but the lesson behind it. I posted about self-worth, about boundaries, about what it means to walk away from places that dim your light. I wasn't trying to be a motivational speaker, just someone telling the truth from where I stood. To my surprise, the posts caught on. People started messaging me privately, thanking me. Event planners from across the country. Young professionals. Even some who'd been guests at that wedding, writing things like, "I didn't know what happened, but now it makes sense." One woman wrote, "I've been the person by the trash before. Thank you for making me feel seen." It moved me more than I expected. Then came the invitation. It was a handwritten card from my cousin Sarah, the one person in the family who had messaged me with kindness the week of the wedding. She and I had always had a quiet bond, the kind built on shared glances and unspoken understanding during chaotic holidays. She was getting married. And she wanted me to organize the whole thing. She didn't just want me as the planner. She wanted me in the wedding. The difference in tone was obvious from the first sentence. "I'm not just inviting you, I'm asking you to be part of something that matters to me." We met over coffee a few days later, and I could tell she had been nervous about reaching out. She said, "I know what happened to you. I watched it. And I hated it. But I didn't say anything, and that's on me." I told her, the silence hurt almost as much as the seat. She nodded. "Then let me make some noise now." Over the next few weeks, we built her wedding from scratch. This time, I had full creative freedom. I chose vendors who cared deeply about their work, not just their rates. I asked for help when I needed it. I kept it honest. No forced smiles. No polished masks. When the big day came, something inside me felt different. Not nervous. Not hesitant. Grounded. This wasn't about proving my worth anymore. It was about creating something meaningful with people who saw it too. The morning of Sarah's wedding was calm, almost unnaturally so. The sun rose gently behind a veil of soft clouds, casting a golden glow across the vineyard she'd chosen. Everything had come together flawlessly, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The florist arrived early, humming as she placed wildflowers across the hand-carved arch we had selected together. The musicians tuned their instruments beneath the oak trees. Even the caterers, who had worked the previous night at another event, looked energized. There was no tension in the air. Just a quiet respect for the work, and for each other. I walked the grounds slowly, clipboard in hand, checking the final details. I could hear laughter from the bridal suite. No panic. No last-minute chaos. Just warmth. And that warmth, somehow, made its way into me too. An hour before the ceremony, I stood near the reception tent, adjusting a table setting when Sarah walked up behind me. She wore a soft white dress with lace sleeves and no veil, exactly as she described. Her eyes were glassy, but she was smiling. "Hey," she said gently. "I just wanted to say, thank you. You made this feel like mine. All of it." I looked at her and said, "It is yours. Every piece of it." Then she added, "You're not just sitting at the main table today. You're sitting next to me." And just like that, the moment I didn't know I needed happened. Not validation. Not a grand apology from the past. But presence. Full, visible, earned presence. During the ceremony, as I stood among the guests, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the guy tucked behind the garbage cans. I was the guy people were nodding toward, smiling at, thanking. A quiet kind of recognition that spoke louder than any speech. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and glasses raised in real celebration. And as the evening sun dipped into the horizon, I found myself seated, truly seated, at the center of it all. Not because I demanded it. Because I belonged. Sarah gave a toast that night. And in it, she said, "Some people plan events. Others create moments that live inside your heart for years. I chose someone who does the second." People clapped. I looked down at my plate, overwhelmed but grateful. I didn't need revenge. I never did. I needed to remember my value. And now, I had. A few weeks after Sarah's wedding, I found myself alone on a quiet Sunday morning, walking through the same park I used to visit in my early 20s when I was building my business from scratch. Back then, I had no money, no clients, and no confidence, just a notebook full of dreams and the stubborn belief that I had something to offer. Now, as I sat on the same bench overlooking the small lake, I wasn't that person anymore. I had more than just a successful company. I had something harder to earn, self-respect. I pulled out my phone, not to scroll but to write. I opened a blank note and began typing what I hoped would be my final words on the whole ordeal, not for the world, but for myself. They put me by the trash not because they forgot who I was, but because they wanted me to forget. They wanted to remind me where I stood in their story. But I had my own story to write. One where I chose my table, my seat, my value. After I typed that, I just sat still. A breeze moved through the trees, birds darted across the water, and the world kept turning. But something inside me had stopped spinning. I had let it go. A few days later, an email landed in my inbox. A small podcast focused on creative entrepreneurship wanted to feature me after reading one of my posts. I agreed, and during the interview, the host asked me a simple question. What would you say to someone who feels invisible in their own family, or overlooked in their work? I paused. Then answered, you don't have to fight for a seat at a table where they only serve leftovers. Build your own table. Invite people who see you. People who value you when no one's watching. The episode went viral. I received hundreds of messages, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Not all apologies, not all redemption stories. Just people saying, I needed to hear that. And that's what made it all worth it. Not the revenge. Not the recognition. But the reminder that dignity is quiet, but unshakable when it comes from within. So if you've ever been seated by the trash, literally or metaphorically, know this. It doesn't define you. But how you rise from it absolutely can. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of the power of standing tall, even when others try to cut us down. Your worth isn't decided by where they place you, only by where you choose to stand next.